The morning began with the city pretending it was not tired of itself. Lights flickered in polite sequences, transit rails hummed with the bored confidence of machines that had done this for decades, and advertisements whispered promises to people who had learned to stop listening. I was standing near Gate 9, arguing quietly with a beverage dispenser that insisted warm coffee was an optional luxury upgrade. It blinked at me in 3 different languages, then offered me something blue that smelled faintly of regret. I declined. That was when I noticed the flyers. They were drifting through the crowd like lost thoughts, square and soft-edged, a shade of pink that did not exist in nature or respectable commerce. People stepped around them at first, assuming they were another pop-up campaign or a malfunctioning hologram. One man tried to swipe through one with his wrist implant and looked offended when it failed to respond. Then I saw where they were coming from. She stood near the security pylons, smiling with the calm confidence of someone who had never been taught to be embarrassed. She looked human enough that my brain tried to file her under familiar categories and failed quietly. Her skin tone fit nowhere specific. Her hair fell in a way that suggested gravity was more of a suggestion than a rule. And her ears, long, elegant, undeniably real, extended past her hairline like punctuation marks at the end of an unfamiliar sentence. She held a neat stack of flyers and offered them to anyone who came within arm's reach. Most people did not take them. One person did, glanced down, laughed too loudly, and handed it back as if it were contagious. I watched her accept the rejection with a nod that suggested she was collecting data, not insults. A hovering drone drifted closer, hesitated, and drifted away again, clearly uncertain which protocol applied to romance-related anomalies. Curiosity is not bravery, it is a minor malfunction. I told myself I was only moving closer because Gate 9 had better lighting. I told myself a lot of things. When she noticed me looking, she raised one of the flyers slightly, like a question mark. "Would you like one?" she asked. Her voice came through my translator cleanly, warm with a hint of static, as if emotion was slightly ahead of syntax. "What is it?" I said, which was a lie because the top line was already readable from where I stood. Looking for love, no fine print, no warnings, no species compatibility chart. I took it before I could stop myself. "That's it?" I asked, turning it over. The back was blank. She tilted her head. "Yes." "That's optimistic." She smiled wider. "I have been told that by less hopeful civilizations." Behind us, someone coughed pointedly. A pair of security officers pretended to study a wall that had not changed in years. I lowered my voice. "You know this is a transit hub, right? People come here to leave, not to whatever this is." "Excellent," she said. "Then they are already prepared for change." I laughed despite myself. It escaped before I could cage it. "You're serious?" "Entirely. And you thought flyers were the way to go." "They work very well on my world." We stopped using them only after everyone found someone and they became redundant. I glanced around at the crowd flowing past us, each person wrapped in their own private urgency. This place might take a while. "I have time," she said. "I crossed 3 light folds and a minor existential audit to be here. Waiting is acceptable." I looked at the flyer again, no conditions at all. She leaned closer, lowering her voice conspiratorially. I briefly considered adding preferably alive, but that seemed unfairly exclusionary. I snorted. She beamed, clearly pleased. A chime sounded overhead, announcing a delay at Gate 7 due to a minor temporal overlap. No one reacted. I realized I had not moved away. I stopped. Names felt suddenly heavier than usual. "I'm just killing time." "Perfect," she said. "So am I. Together that becomes something else." I glanced at her ears, then back at her face. "Do you get a lot of reactions?" "Yes, fear, fascination, attraction, mild hostility, and one proposal involving a tax shelter." "Did you accept?" "No, he required me to pretend to be a domestic appliance." "Reasonable line to draw." She laughed, a sound like glass catching sunlight. For a moment the city seemed to pause, as if even it was curious what would happen next. I folded the flyer carefully and put it in my pocket, unsure why that felt important. "So," I said, "what happens if someone says yes?" Her eyes softened, and for the first time the humor gave way to something quieter. "Then we begin with honesty," she said, "and see how far it takes us." The dispenser behind me beeped triumphantly and produced the blue drink anyway. She eyed it thoughtfully. "Is that a local courting ritual?" she asked. only if you're trying to scare someone off. Ah, she said, I will observe. I handed her the cup without thinking. She took it, sniffed, and made a face so human it startled me. Your species is very brave, she said gently. I smiled, and somewhere between the hum of the rails and the glow of the pink flyers, the city felt slightly less tired. The food stall did not ask questions, which made it one of the most emotionally intelligent structures in the sector. It accepted credits, biometric size, and one kind of unofficial barter involving small mechanical favors, and in return it produced meals that tasted like consensus rather than culture. We stood in line together, which felt like an escalation even though it was only a matter of standing next to each other while a glowing menu argued with itself. She studied the options with genuine interest. You have many varieties of compressed protein, she said. We like choice, I replied. It makes us feel in control. Does it work? Statistically, no. She nodded thoughtfully. On my world, we removed unnecessary choices. It reduced anxiety but caused riots among philosophers. That drags. When it was our turn, the vendor unit flickered, scanned us both, and paused. A thin beam traced the outline of her ears, hesitated, then displayed a polite warning about cross-species allergen liability. She leaned forward. I will not sue, she said cheerfully. The unit beeped, clearly unconvinced, but processed the order anyway. We collected 2 trays and moved to a narrow standing table bolted to the floor like it might attempt escape otherwise. She picked up a utensil, turned it over, then tried to use it upside down. That end goes in the food, I said. Ah, she replied, your utensils are more directive than ours. What do yours do? They offer suggestions. I laughed, then caught myself doing it again, as if laughter might somehow be rationed. We ate in companionable silence for a moment, punctuated by the hiss of nearby transit doors and the low murmur of conversations that never quite finished. I noticed people glancing at us, then looking away too quickly, the way you do when you're not sure whether you're witnessing a scandal or a street performance. So, I said, what happens if this works? She tilted her head. Define works. You find what you're looking for. She considered this, then I stopped handing out flyers. That's it. Yes, love is not a career for us, it is a condition. Once resolved, we move on to other problems. Like what? Entropy, she said lightly. Weather patterns, poetry. Poetry seems harder than entropy. She smiled. You would say that. A small child drifted closer, staring openly at her ears. The child's guardian followed, flustered, murmuring apologies. She crouched slightly to meet the child's gaze. Do you want to touch them? She asked. The guardian froze. I froze. The child nodded solemnly and reached out, fingers brushing the curve of her ear. Her eyes widened. They're warm, the child said. Yes, she replied, I am not decorative. The child laughed and was gently pulled away, waving enthusiastically. I exhaled a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. You're very calm, I said. Fear is inefficient, she replied. Also contagious, I try not to spread it. I poked at my food. You don't mind being stared at. I mind being misunderstood, she said. Staring is just curiosity without manners. We felt quiet again. Somewhere above us, an announcement mispronounced 3 station names and apologized in advance. My translator hummed softly, recalibrating to her speech patterns, smoothing edges I hadn't noticed were there. Why here? I asked finally, out of all the places. She looked around, eyes reflecting light from a dozen artificial suns. Because this is where your species passes through, she said. You are always leaving or arriving. It makes you honest for a moment. Liminal spaces encourage truth. That's unsettlingly accurate. She grinned. I have done research. A pair of maintenance drones rolled past, one of them playing a tinny melody that sounded suspiciously like a love song from 3 decades ago. She listened, amused. Your machines are sentimental, she said. They're programmed by us, I replied. It's a hazard. We finished eating. She gathered the trays, stacking them with precise care, then paused. Would you like to walk? She asked. Not away, just alongside. I nodded. We moved with the crowd, matching pace, an accidental orbit forming between us. The city continued its endless performance, but it felt like a quieter version, as if someone had turned down the volume on panic. On my world, she said, we believed love required prerequisites, compatibility indices, predictive grief models. It did not go well. What happened? We optimized it, she said, and lost it. That sounds familiar. She stopped near a viewport overlooking the fold lanes where ships slid in and out of existence like thoughts being revised. She placed a hand against the glass. "We forgot that risk is not a flaw," she said softly. "It is the point." I stood beside her, watching a freighter emerge slightly crooked and correct itself with embarrassed thrusters. "So the flyers," I said, "they're a rebellion." "Yes," she said, "and an invitation. To everyone." She looked at me then, really looked, and the humor faded just enough to matter. "To anyone willing to be seen." My communicator chimed, reminding me of obligations I suddenly found less persuasive. I silenced it. "Do you get lonely?" I asked. "Sometimes," she said, "but loneliness is not absence, it is anticipation without direction." That might be the saddest thing I've heard all week. She laughed, bright and unguarded. "Then my timing is excellent." A security officer approached, expression carefully neutral. "Ma'am," he said, gesturing vaguely at her ears, "we've had some reports." She nodded. "Of course you have. What exactly are you doing here?" He handed him a flyer. He read it, blinked, then sighed. "We don't have a form for this." "Would you like one?" she asked. He considered, then shook his head, handing it back. "Just don't block traffic." "We won't," she promised. He walked away, rubbing his temples. She tucked the flyer back into her stack, unbothered. "You make an impression," I said. "I try to make connections," she corrected. We stood there, watching ships and people and possibilities slide past. I realized that at some point, without ceremony, I had stopped thinking of her as alien. "What's your name?" I asked. She paused, then said it, a sound that bent slightly in the air, too large for my mouth. "My translator will never get that right," I said. "That's all right," she replied. "You can call me by the way you feel when you say it." I laughed again, helplessly, and somewhere deep in the machinery of the city, something shifted, as if the universe itself had leaned in, curious how this would end. By the third day, people had started to plan their routes around her. Not to avoid her exactly, but to decide whether they would pass close enough to be tempted or far enough to pretend they had not seen the flyers at all. I noticed because I had begun to do the same thing, and then noticed myself noticing it, which felt like a personal failure and a small success at the same time. She had learned the rhythms of the station. She knew when the maintenance crews changed shifts, when the announcements glitched into poetry, when the air smelled faintly of ionized rain from ships that had come too far too fast. She no longer needed to ask where to stand. The space seemed to open for her on its own. I walked with her, not always beside her, sometimes a step behind, sometimes pretending to be busy with my wrist display while still listening to the cadence of her voice as she spoke to strangers. Some laughed, some argued. One woman cried, apologized for crying, then cried harder. One man asked if love came with a warranty. She told him no, but it did come with maintenance, and he walked away nodding gravely as if this explained everything. Security checked in daily now, more out of habit than concern. They brought coffee once. It was worse than the blue drink, which felt like an achievement. She accepted it politely anyway and used it as a prop while explaining, for the fifth time, that she was not recruiting, converting, or conducting an experiment that would end with anyone being replaced by a pod version of themselves. "Disappointing," one officer muttered. "Yes," she agreed. "I hear that often." The authorities from Offworld finally arrived on the fourth day, which was faster than expected and slower than feared. Their ship docked without drama, which was itself dramatic. I watched from a distance as they approached her, three of them, tall and narrow and shimmering slightly, as if reality had not quite finished rendering them. They spoke in a language that bent around itself. My translator refused outright. She listened, nodding, ears twitching in ways I had begun to understand as emphasis rather than agitation. When she replied, their posture changed, a subtle recalibration. One of them laughed, a sound like glass settling. I waited, hands in pockets, rehearsing several speeches I would never give. When they left, she returned to me, expression light. "They wanted to know if I was destabilizing anything," she said, and I told them no, she replied, just revealing. I exhaled. "Are you in trouble?" "No," she said, "but I am finished." The word landed between us, heavy and quiet. "Finished?" I echoed. She nodded. "I have done what I came to do." My first instinct was to make a joke, to deflect the sharpness of it. "Run out of flyers." She smiled, but it did not quite reach her eyes. "Run out of reasons to hand them out." I looked around. The station felt the same as ever, no alarms, no cosmic fanfare, but it also felt altered, like a room after someone honest has spoken in it. So what happens now? I asked. Now, she said, I choose. I waited, the city hummed, a ship departed with unnecessary flair, somewhere someone argued with a machine and lost. I was prepared to leave alone, she continued, prepared for that outcome. It was statistically dominant. Statistics don't like surprises, I said. No, she agreed. They call them errors. She reached into her bag and withdrew something small, a shard of light folded into a shape that hurt to look at directly. She held it between us. This is a memory, she said. From my world, we share them when something matters enough to risk misunderstanding. What happens if I misunderstand it? I asked. Then you will still have felt it, she said. And that is sufficient. I hesitated only a moment before touching it. The station fell away, not vanished, just stepped aside. I felt warmth and grief and laughter braided together, a civilization learning the hard way that perfection is a dead end. I felt love given freely and lost repeatedly and given again anyway, stubborn and luminous. When it released me, I was breathing hard. She steadied me with a hand that was very real. Okay, I said hoarsely. That's cheating. She laughed, relieved. You enjoyed it. I did, I admitted, and I hate that you're leaving. She considered me carefully. You could come with me. The offer hung there, impossible and simple. I have a life, I said automatically. Yes, she said gently, so do I. I thought of my routines, my small comforts, my carefully managed expectations. I thought of the way I had started to notice people differently, to listen more, to laugh without checking if it was allowed. I'm afraid, I said. She nodded. Good, that means you are paying attention. I looked at her ears, the curve of them catching the light, the way they had become familiar without becoming ordinary. Do you have conditions? I asked quietly. She smiled, soft and certain. Only that you choose freely. I laughed, a shaky sound. That's the worst one. Yes, she agreed, it always is. We left the station together, not in a rush, not in triumph, just walking. People watched. Some waved. One person held up a flyer they had kept, creased and cherished. Outside, the ship waited, humming with restrained possibility. I paused at the ramp, looking back once at the city that had shaped me and been reshaped in small ways by her presence. I don't know what I'm doing, I said. She took my hand. Neither do I, she replied, but I am very interested to find.